Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa on France 24. I'm Vedika Bahel, and here's the top headlines from across the continent. Congolese authorities say the death toll from 2 attacks in the country's east has risen to 89, carried out by the Allied Democratic Forces, or ADF. They're the latest in a string of mass attacks on civilians in North Kivu. We bring you the latest from our correspondents. The Africa Climate Summit has come to a close. The conference saw heads of state and thousands of delegates from across the continent meet in Ethiopia to underline Africa's priorities ahead of COP30 climate talks and secure funding for green investments. And in a corner of Nairobi's bustling Kenyatta market, one shop owner's love for curating and collecting vinyl records has made a sanctuary that commemorates Africa's musical heritage. And tourists, collectors and vinyl enthusiasts come from around the world in search of classics. Thank you for joining us on the programme. We start this bulletin in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where militants from the Allied Democratic Forces linked to the Islamic State have been stepping up attacks in recent weeks. This week has seen multiple attacks in the North Kivu region that have left dozens of civilians dead. Emmett Livingston in Kinshasa brings us the latest.
At least 89 people have been killed in separate attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces Group, or ADF, in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. According to the government, on Monday night, ADF fighters killed 71 civilians in the village of Ntoyo in the Lubera area of North Kivu province. A separate ADF attack also happened on Monday night, which killed 18 civilians. The ADF is an affiliate of the Islamic State group and one of the deadliest militias in Congo. The Congolese and Ugandan armies have been battling the ADF since late 2021, when they launched Operation Shuja to eliminate the group. But so far, the operation has failed to stop massacres.
Operation Shuja has pushed the ADF further into more difficult areas, such as forests and remote regions. While we now have a certain level of security along the Ugandan border, there are ongoing incursions into these challenging areas, including forests, which the Congolese army avoids. So while we have certainly worked to strengthen Uganda's border security, the Congolese populations in areas that are difficult to access have more or less been abandoned.
The death toll from this week's attack is huge and adds to a string of bloody attacks that have taken place over the summer. In June, for example, ADF fighters slaughtered at least 40 civilians who were praying inside a church. The Congolese government on Tuesday reiterated a promise to track down the militants, but local civil society groups have criticised what they see as government inaction.
Moving on, a court in Johannesburg Wednesday sentenced 7 Chinese nationals to 20 years in prison each for the human trafficking, kidnapping and forced labour of Malawians. The sentence comes nearly 6 years after they were arrested, when local authorities raided a Johannesburg factory and found 91 Malawian nationals, 37 of them children, working in horrific conditions. South African government has issued a warning that human trafficking and modern slavery are on the rise. Tom Canetti brings us more from Cape Town.
There were 91 Malawians, including 37 children, working and living in appalling conditions in this Johannesburg sweatshop. It was only in 2019 when one man managed to escape that the premises was raided. He testified that the workers were assaulted, threatened with a firearm if they disobeyed orders, and were locked inside the secured premises. The police say that the workers were smuggled into the country via shipping containers, and the government actually issued a warning earlier in September saying that human trafficking is on the rise here in South Africa. When we were in Malawi for a France 24 report in August, we actually met someone who claims to have been lured into modern slavery from Malawi to South Africa. And on top of that, the Platform for Investigative Journalism in Malawi released a report earlier this year saying that Malawi has become a hub for human trafficking, with South Africa a key destination to send slave labour.
Next, the second edition of the Africa Climate Summit has wrapped up in Addis Ababa. It's seen as a key precursor for the continent to outline its priorities before the global UN COP30 in November. Leaders of the 54-nation continent, which has been pounded this year by droughts, floods and landslides, have pushed to reframe the continent from victim of climate suffering to an investment opportunity. And to accelerate Africa-led solutions and adaptation, the continent is aiming to secure $50 billion a year for a new continental climate solutions initiative put forward by the Ethiopian PM Abiy Ahmed. Now, for more on this, let's bring in Hilda Flavia Nekaboi, Ugandan climate and environmental rights activist and the founder of Uganda's Fridays for Future movement. Thank you for joining us here on France 24. Now, going back to the Africa Climate Summit in Addis Ababa, you're present there on the ground and you were at the summit. Can you tell us more about what you've seen and outline the main takeaways from the conference for us?
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. As a youth leader, I am at the African Climate Summit to remind our leaders that the message they are sending out to the world must represent the voices of African people. And what has come out of this summit is an African Climate Summit declaration, one of the kind, very inspiring. For the first time, our leaders have committed to a green first pathway to develop, to make Africa a global hub for green innovation. Some of the outcomes of this declaration shows ambitious new climate finance pledges, like the Africa Climate Facility to mobilize $50 billion annually to invest in locally led climate solutions. And also the declaration challenges the unfair global policies. For example, the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, which could affect Africa's GDP. And another very inspiring outcome is that our leaders have called for a just transition, one that respects the African context and doesn't penalize developing countries for pursuing development. This is very good. And also the centrality of a people-centered just transition, one that includes the voices of African communities. This was our demand, and we are happy to say that it has featured in the Africa Climate Summit declaration.
And Hilda, you mentioned the financing there. Let's go back to that. So Africa suffers disproportionately from the climate crisis, but it attracts less than 2% of global green investments. Financing, as you said, remains one of the biggest issues there. But how can this funding gap be bridged? Is the solution to tax the polluters maybe, or what are the perspectives possibly?
The solution is to tax the polluters, because when we tax the richest 1% of the global world, we can raise 2 billion euros. This is from a research that was made by Oxfam. This money, that the 2 billion euros, can be used to fund the havoc that is caused by global north countries in our communities. This is a very good solution to create money for countries who are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis.
And very quickly, Hilda, you work particularly with the youth. How important is the youth voice given Africa's current position in the climate crisis? And why is the youth important in this?
The youth are important from an African perspective because we contribute the biggest percentage to this continent. We are the biggest population. That means our voices matter, because each and every policy that is being made by our leaders right now is going to affect us as youth. We are the ones who will benefit from an economy that is either thriving or that is either breaking down. So we youth, African youth, have to share our views on these global platforms to make sure that our voices are fully represented.
Thank you so much for that insight and analysis. That's Hilda Flavia Nekaboi, the Ugandan climate and environmental rights activist. Thank you so much for joining us here on Eye on Africa. Next up, a new report was published by the World Food Programme this Wednesday, and it highlights the progress in school nutrition in sub-Saharan Africa. In 3 years, 20 million more children are now receiving school meals through government-led programmes. There's been particularly visible improvement in Chad, Ethiopia, Madagascar and Rwanda. It's around a 30% rise across the African continent, bringing the total number of pupils benefiting to 87 million. Details now from Nairobi with Bastien Renouy.
School meals are crucial for children, not only because they help them learn better, but also because for the poorest household, they ensure that the kids are getting at least one full meal a day. More and more countries on the continent understand this crucial role and are investing more and more money to ensure that schools are supplied, making it less important to receive international help, a positive step for the WFP.
Many governments are seeing that this is really a policy leverage point for not only education, but for health, for nutrition, for agriculture. So really many governments are realizing that this is a multi-policy intervention. And I think as a human being, normally it feels really good when you say, I did this for myself, and not, someone did it for me.
However, millions of children in low-income countries and countries at war like Somalia, South Sudan and the DRC still lack school meals. And this is due to two main reasons. First, low domestic funding, and then the international context. More and more countries like the US are reluctant to fund these meals, but the WFP says that despite this difficult context, it remains committed to find solutions to make sure that these kids are getting food.
And finally, now we may be in an age of digital music with Spotify and Apple Music amongst others, but in Nairobi's Kenyatta market, vinyl still reigns supreme. Known as the Vinyl King, one man has spent 30 years preserving Africa's musical heritage on record, and collectors and enthusiasts come from far and wide in search of vinyl records they cannot find elsewhere. Olivia Bizo brings us the story.
This shop in Nairobi is one of the last places in Africa where vinyl thrives. Since 1989, Jimmy has been curating rare African records, Benga, Swahili pop and Afro-Cuban beats.
Vinyl records, you are sure to be dealing with the real thing. So that's why I decided to get stuck. I didn't move to cassettes, I didn't move to CDs. And I'm still doing vinyl even today. Remember, there's a big renaissance of vinyl the last 12 years.
Jimmy's shop isn't just about music. It's about preserving records that are disappearing. Many of these albums come from regions ravaged by conflict, making them more difficult to find.
Other music like Congolese music, because of the strife in the country for quite a long time, Somalia, Ethiopia, instability made it like carrying around records from one place to another. That's extra baggage, so they are just discarded.
The shop is drawing visitors from across the world.
Jimmy's is really like a time capsule back into the age of the Benga music, when music was being made to tell the story of people's experiences, during these amazing times of Kenya's history.
For Jimmy, vinyl is more than nostalgia. It's about preserving Africa's musical soul for future generations.
And that concludes today's edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you again for joining us. Stay tuned to France 24.